The U.S. has over 564,000 homeless people spread throughout the nation. In 2016, New York housed 127,000 people in their homeless shelters alone. 35% of those people were children. We all know it exists, but we don't know to the extent. In our small town of Thomasville, we don't get to see that this is easily our neighbors, our families, and our friends. In my recent visit to New York, I saw how common being homeless was. I saw how the effects of poverty changed throughout the 5 boroughs. I saw how people reacted to these. Today I'm going to share with you why homelessness is so common, where it's the most common, and what we can do to change it. To begin, you'll need to know why the municipal shelters of New York sleep 74% more people than it did 10 years ago, according to Coalition for the Homeless. Many researches and surveys say that the main reason for homelessness is due to housing loss. This housing loss comes from eviction, overcrowding, job loss, and disease or hazardous housing conditions. Unfortunate events like losing a job or choosing a disease-infected house are not something that's planned. There are so many shops and businesses in New York that it leads to competition, and the competition can lead to a business shutdown or bankruptcy. I've seen many people that have worked for a business that have gone bankrupt, and when they do, they lose their jobs and they're jobless for months at a time. Some of these people have to provide for families, and with no money they can't do that. Sometimes eviction and overcrowding are simply due to because of the 8.491 million people that live in New York. They all need houses, and some are willing to pay more just to get one. This problem also often leaves people on the streets without a home, without help, without any money, without anywhere to put their stuff. If you've ever seen a homeless family, you've probably seen the fear in the parents' eyes of what's going to come next. However, the amount of homeless people in shelters is not a true reflection of the struggle throughout the boroughs. Most poverty that causes people to be without homes lies in the Bronx and Queens. The city of New York focuses on appealing to tourists rather than providing better accommodations for the people that call New York home. Manhattan streets house many of the non-sheltered homeless people, yet they continue to spend money on making the city nicer rather than creating jobs for the homeless. While on a tour of Manhattan, our guide stressed how the improvements for the city focused on reducing pollution in the bigger buildings, rather than reducing the amount of homeless people living outside of these big buildings. Queens and the Bronx are less appealing to travelers because of the obvious poverty, so these boroughs tend to seem more like Hoovervilles rather than part of the city. These boroughs are so run down and provide such unlivable conditions that you can see the people sleeping on the streets around every corner, but no one seems to pay it any attention. It's easy for the people to ignore the problem, but no one notices it more than the people who aren't from there. Now that we understand how major the problem is, we can understand how to change the situation. New York can fix the homeless problem by building up the boroughs, which create new jobs, which will ultimately provide the money to buy homes and get people and families off the streets. By building and reconstructing buildings outside of Manhattan, it's not only more appealing to tourists, but it could also move jobs outside of the main attraction. Construction and cleaning doesn't really have any requirements or education, so the homeless could come in and work for a project for the months that it takes and then go on their way. As we drove through Queens to the airport, I felt that I should duck down or stay away from the streets because the buildings were so broken, so it's not like the boroughs couldn't use the help. Creating jobs also helps the city in the future by teaching homeless new skills that they can use to keep working and eventually get them off the streets for good. The people that sleep on the streets are usually not clean or well-groomed. You'll see many with long beards. They're not showered, and that makes people turn and avoid looking at it so they can act like the problem just doesn't exist. Many people like to pretend homelessness isn't a problem that affects them, but in reality, when the people are sleeping outside of your building and they drive away business, that could be you one day. As we can see, homelessness isn't very preventable in New York, but it could be. As our discussion went along today, we could really see the impacts of losing a house and what it can do to a family, jobs, and cities. Although the homeless statistics have risen in the last 10 years due to the loss of houses, we can stop the rise by creating jobs outside of Manhattan, which will not only help the people, but also help the city. What will you do to help homeless people in your neighborhood?